And welcome back to this edition of Sports Talk. And it's Don Henderson along with Doug Miles as we come to you again on a Monday afternoon. Very busy weekend of sports. Lots going on. We're going to pay some tribute today to really one of the great quarterbacks of the NFL who passed away over the weekend. I know, Don, you knew him quite well. He played, of course, for the LA Rams, but also for the Philadelphia Eagles. I guess we'll start with that. Great Roman Gabriel. I think he was 83 years old. So you must have worked with him or interviewed him when he played for the Eagles, right?
Yeah, he was straight into the Eagles, and they really had great expectations, to be honest with you, that was going to be the quarterback that was going to turn them around and put them back in contention again to win the National Football East, but it just never really worked out. To be honest with you, he's one of the few people that he and I had quite a disagreement, not over anything personal or anything like that. I just felt that he held the ball for such a long period of time, and he would get sacked and sacked and sacked. And Eagles' offensive line was not as great as they could have been, and they kept getting great penetration on him. And he turned out to be a good quarterback, but he couldn't do very much for the Eagles because they just never really had a supporting cast that could follow him after coming from L.A., and he was very, very well-renowned in L.A.
It was the end of his career. I think he had played for L.A. about 9-10 years, so it was the tail end of his career. He came to Philly, right?
Correct. And then, as I say, that was one of the things that, surprised. In fact, Gene Kelly, the late Gene Kelly, great broadcaster, and not just Philadelphia, but Notre Dame, and did a lot, Gene Kelly, Philadelphia Philly baseball and so forth. He and I were in the studio after a game. We left with about 3 or 4 minutes to go, and a game was about maybe 5 games into the season, 6 games into the season, and went back. And I just said, they're not going to win with the system. Either they got to get a better offensive line, or they better worry about Gabriel because he just can't get rid of the ball fast enough. And that turned into a little bit of a controversy for a few weeks.
I remember the tail end of his career. I used to watch, when I first started watching football, I'd see him occasionally on TV in New York. You occasionally get the Rams games. I do remember seeing him, and then more with the Eagles later on toward the end of his career. He was the old traditional, drop back in the pocket passer. He was not a scrambler at all, right?
Exactly right. And no, he didn't really only ran out of necessity.
Yeah, he was a big guy for the time.
Yes, he was. He was.
Yeah.
He was an ideal. I mean, when you look at him, his size and structure and arm and all, he was an ideal quarterback. And but as I say, no matter how big and strong or fast or whatever you want to refer to your quarterbacks, if you don't have an offensive line that's going to protect you, you're not going to throw very many satisfactory passes when you're running backwards.
One of the great names, though, right? No better name in sports than Roman Gabriel. Had that kind of haircut, kind of looked like the Roman gladiator, didn't he?
And I'll tell you, he played for some good teams out there on the West Coast. Yeah. I'll tell you that.
George Allen, right? When George Allen was out there, right?
Yeah.
Fearsome Foursome, wasn't he the quarterback of the Fearsome Foursome, the defense out there? That team, right? The 60s.
Yep. I'll tell you, they had one of the teams you thought would never leave L.A. because they were so popular and so good, and wound up as soon as they started to lose, that was the end of the fan support, and they had to wind up moving the franchise. So, but L.A. had 3 teams. They had Davis's team with Oakland. They had the Raiders there. They just couldn't. So we'll see how they do now. They got 2 new teams out there now, and they got a stadium that's unbelievable. So I guess somehow they're going to hold on to the fans whether the teams win or lose. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, they actually moved twice. They moved to Anaheim before they went to St. Louis. Remember that? They were in Anaheim for a while. Then St. Louis. Then came back to L.A., and the Coliseum was their home field for a long time, way back, going back to the 40s and 50s, but they did.
That was really the only.
So they did get a.
That was really the only stadium. Yeah, the only stadium they had was the Coliseum. that was built, held 110,000
1932
people, and
Olympics. Yeah.
yeah, and then wound up with the Dodgers playing there for a couple of years when they finally moved out there, but had no field. The Dodger Stadium didn't exist, and they played in the Coliseum
Right.
with no. You and I could throw a ball over the left field fence there.
There's some videos of that online. You can see Vin Scully doing some of the games, and I think left field was like 220 feet or something. It was really short.
I can't remember I can't remember what the number was, but it was awfully short.
Yeah,
I'll
kind of
tell
like
you
the old
that.
Polo Grounds. Wasn't the
But
Polo
it's
Grounds pretty short and down left field?
the both holes were very short, under 200 feet.
At the Polo Grounds, right?
Polo Grounds, right field, definitely. That's where Dusty Rhodes hit the big 2 home runs in the World Series in '54. Both of them were in the Polo Grounds.
So we remember Roman Gabriel, and he was only in Philly, what, about 2 seasons before he retired?
You know, I maybe more than I don't really remember, to be honest with you, what the number was,
It
but
wasn't
it might have
long.
been a little more than what.
Yeah.
No, it might have been 3. It might have been 3 years, but it was not a long period.
Then after that, was it Norm Snead came in after that?
Norm Snead came in as a trade from Washington.
Right.
Uh,
Sonny Jurgensen, right?
and right, Sonny Jurgensen went from Philadelphia to Washington and became in fact, that's when Vince Lombardi moved over and coached Washington at that time.
Yeah, 1 year.
And so they had Vince Lombardi as their coach, and they had Sonny Jurgensen as their quarterback, and the Eagles had Norm Snead.
Yeah. He bounced around a lot. Norm just passed away. We talked about him maybe 6 months to a year ago. He played for the Giants, played for the 49ers. Eagles, like you said, had put up good numbers. He was one of those guys that never was really on a team at the time he was there that could really put it all together.
Again, you have to have a great supporting cast, and as I said to you a couple of times, Norm and I did the pregame show before Notre. Yeah, TV. I did TV with them. We did the pregame show before. I try to explain this every time. People don't realize it was only, one game that was on during the weekends. You didn't have 5 and 8, 9 channels with all football. You only had one game, and that was what was designated by the broadcast team until finally. So when Norm and I did the pregame show for Notre Dame, the game was played, and we did the pregame and postgame show, and but it was the day after or that night, depending on how they had it scheduled, because you weren't allowed to show the game live, and so we did the pre and post game show and showed the whole game the next day.
Right. Yeah, I remember New York used to be able to watch the next day. They'd show either that game or I think Penn State, they did that as well. Some games they wouldn't see the next day or a highlight package. Maybe you see it in an hour, an hour condensed version.
You're exactly right. It was always Penn State was always on the next day. Notre Dame, they were only on X number of times during the season, and so consequently they were always on the next day.
Right.
And so that was the way it was. That was the way in the National Football League was the same way. You didn't see all the games until the Washington Redskins got to be, or the Commanders now, but the Washington Redskins at that time, it got good. And then all the politicians in Washington, they wanted to see the games.
Got rid of the blackout rule.
So, right. So they changed that. The politicians said, well, we're not having any blackout rule. We're going to be able to see the Redskins anytime we want to see them. And that was the end of the one game a week.
They can get that done quickly if they want. They can't get other stuff done quickly that we want. But they got that done fast, didn't they?
The only thing they get done quickly is getting money in their own pockets. They get raises. There's always enough money to give them raises every time there's
done. They can get things done if they want to, but it's a whole other show. We'll do that some other time. But speaking of the end of the full slate of games, you didn't get that obviously back in the 70s, even the 60s. But there was that show that your friend Tom Brookshire and Pat Summerall did, that This Week in the NFL, where they showed all the highlights in an hour show. I used to watch that every week. That was great. You see the little film highlights of the game.
Yep. I'll tell you, they were a great team working together. It was too bad that they had to be split up, but they were a
Yeah,
great team working together. And Tom was a terrific guy. He passed away with cancer too a number of years ago. Was
right.
a great defensive back for the Philadelphia Eagles, and um, I'll tell you, cancer is a tough thing, boy.
Yeah, brutal. Yeah. Yeah, I thought, and this may be heresy, but I always thought Brookshire and Summerall were better than Summerall and Madden. They were good, don't get me wrong, but I thought Brookshire and Summerall were better as a team doing games.
Yeah, they really did. They did a great job, and I'll tell you, it was when you hear Tommy talk about the last time they didn't do the Super Bowl, they were just representing CBS at the Super Bowl, and the celebrity room, the bill, I guess, was a little higher than CBS wanted it to be by a lot of money, and that's when they split everybody up and said, "Whoa, wait a minute here, we're going to change all this."
Yeah, well,
And that
Summerall
was
obviously he
that
talked
was
about it. Had a drinking issue, obviously alcoholism, and then I guess together they were kind of known to enjoy themselves after the game and sometimes
oh
during the
boy.
game with a
They
drink or
certainly
two.
were after they certainly were the night before and the morning after, and
Right.
they had quite a relationship. Brookie never had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous to correct this problem. He sort of straightened himself out,
Yeah.
but
Summerall never did
he did
until it
get
was almost too late. Had to have the liver transplant.
yeah yeah he had a liver transplant and he had to really adjust the problem, and I'll say that for him in the end he did,
Turned his life
and
around.
continued to
Yeah.
do yeah, he continued to do football, continued to do the Masters, and straighten himself out. So we
Yeah.
got to give him a lot of credit for that.
No doubt. Well, the other story we want to talk about, of course, the longtime Yankee announcer and really a broadcaster that those of us in New York really knew going back to the early 1970s. Of course, he did the Islander games for many years, the New York Nets when they were really good with Dr. J. And then he went down to Atlanta for a while, did the Hawks and Braves on TBS, and of course came back to New York with the Yankees for the last 36 years. John Sterling, kind of all of a sudden, retired last week. They gave him a nice day on Saturday. And I know you knew him a little bit, Don, over the years. And of course, he goes down as probably the longest. I guess Rizzuto is probably the longest announcer with the Yankees, but he's probably number two, right, in time served.
Well, the number they gave, I don't have it in front of me. It was 5,000 something.
Yeah.
So he's class by himself, and they did. Susan Wallman and the Yankees, his partner for such a long period of time, and he was the first one to have a female partner as a broadcaster and play-by-play co-host, and the two of them were very compatible from day one. He worked with them. Actually, he worked with Susan at WFAN. Susan opened the station at WFAN, and John Sterling would fit in doing some talk shows and interviews and things like that. And but very controversial. A lot of the writers, they made a lot of fun about some of the things that he did. And he did have his own way of doing things and his own stick. And he could continue with it right through till the end. Even as you said, I didn't see the press conference Saturday, but you said even through the press conference on Saturday, when he addressed the media, he talked about the writers and broadcasters and used their nickname and so forth. And that was really his thing. But a terrific. Nobody's ever been in the booth as long and done as many games as he did.
Yeah, he had that. Like I said, that was his style. He made up the nicknames of players, and of course the home run calls. A lot of people loved it. It wasn't my favorite, but that's just me. But people loved it, and he was really more of I would say he's more of an entertainer than a great play-by-play broadcaster. But the Yankees, I think George Steinbrenner loved him. That's why he was there, and he was never going to leave that job until Sterling decided, right? I mean, Steinbrenner loved his father. I'm talking about.
Right, he loved them, and he loved Susan Wallman, and he was one of the ones that agreed to have Susan go in. And Susan actually was a big part of getting Mr. Steinbrenner back friendship with Yogi Berra and
Right.
getting him to go to the Yogi Berra Museum over there in New Jersey. And they have a lot of very, very positive things that worked, not only the games, but outside of the games. And when you listen to the what would be equivalent to 30-30 now on ESPN, all those replays and everything, John Sterling did all those.
Right.
And I'll tell you, he was terrific on all of that kind of stuff. He didn't, there wasn't any nicknames or anything like that. He did it very straight, and he did all the voiceovers. He did a terrific job.
Yeah, great voice. I mean, I remember him as a kid. He used to have a talk show, Sports Talk, one of the early ones,
Right.
on WMCA at night. I used to listen to him. He was very good at that. That was, to me, that was the best thing he did as far as enjoyment. Then he goes to the Islander games and the Nets games for many years. Competent broadcast. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he was terrible as a broadcaster, just the style. But a lot of people loved it, so that's fine. But 86 years old. I think a lot of people were surprised that they thought maybe he was a little younger than that. So, but he said he just didn't want to travel anymore, and you can't blame him for that.
Yeah, and it has triplets, and which is quite a feat in itself to have triplets. And he has another daughter too.
Yeah, he had them later in life.
Yes, he got married. Yep, he got married and had children much later. And I know him really more because I only ran into him once in a while when down here spring training. I'd see him every now and then if I went over to Tampa to see the Yankees play, and they came over here in the early days and they would broadcast. They don't do that anymore. But I knew him really better in Atlanta because I was doing the 76ers, and every time I went down, he would be doing the Atlanta Hawks. And so I knew him quite well from Atlanta, even before we got involved with, in New York. But it was just sudden. One day, like Monday, I think on Monday or Tuesday, you and I talked about it on the phone. He just came in and said, "This is it. I'm going to call it quits." That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I got to see him. I went to the sportscaster seminar. It was a camp, actually, in Atlanta back in '87, and he was one of the invited guest speakers. He was doing the Atlanta games at the time, and spent about an hour and a half with the class and told stories and in his style. I mean, I think that's the way he was, kind of shoot from the hip, kind of not a lot of filter on the mouth. Interesting to listen to. He had a lot of opinions, but I think that's the way he was all the time. That wasn't just his act on the air, right?
And they also said, which was not surprising to me, but when he would fly in with the team, he would always be in the back with books and all. He never
very quiet.
Never really.
Right.
Yes, he was a real studious guy and just read all the time. And he wasn't a guy that intermingled with the players a lot. That wasn't his style either. And but he was very, very quiet. I never was on a plane ride with him, but I've talked to a lot of people that were, and they just talked about it. He just sort of isolated himself anytime there was a long trip or plane or anything. And that's surprising because most of the broadcasters that I knew, talked to players and played cards with them or whatever else on the plane. My understanding was, I don't know this firsthand because I wasn't there, but that was not his style.
No. When the mic was on or the camera was on, he could turn it on or in front of a group. But very quiet. Otherwise, they said, not a lot about him that I knew his history. I mean, until I looked it up. He grew up in New York, but that's about all I know. And then all of a sudden, he was a broadcaster in New York. But I don't know what he did. Where he grew up. Do you know any of the backstory about him?
I don't know where you're. Yeah, I guess he's from the New York. Yeah, because he always talked about.
So there's not a lot of where he went to school. Vin Scully's story. Red Barber's story, college and all that.
Right.
Not much about Sterling, but he had a great career. I mean, don't take that away from him. 50 some odd years. Pretty good.
More recently about his divorce and the kids. The fact he has the triplets.
In fact,
he talked a lot about having the kids in college, and I think sort of tongue in cheek talked about continuing to work because I've got kids in college,
right?
And I think they're just about 20 in the 20 area now, maybe 19, 20, something like that.
I guess those were his kids behind him. I think there's 2 sons and a daughter. So they looked like his kids. They looked like in their early 20s. So, yeah.
Well, there's a older daughter too.
Oh, maybe that's okay. Yeah, I saw 3
Yeah, I think.
adults standing near him, young adults. I assume those were his kids, in the picture.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, we want to give him a little bit of time, remembering not that he's gone or anything, but he's gone from the booth anyway for a while. He might make some guest appearances, who knows? But
he says not. Career. He says not.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said that when I made my statement to retire, he said that was it. I would imagine if some folks called him up from the fan or something, wanted to do, interviews or something like that, he probably would do that. But he said that, nothing is going to entice him. As you said, a couple of years ago, he made the decision, which he followed through on, which was he wasn't going to travel, especially the West Coast.
And short road trips, right?
Yeah. And I really thought, to be honest with you, I really thought the fan was going to make that decision before this season started because of the fact that he was taking so many games off,
right?
Because he just said it was too tiring. So I thought the fan would, make a deal with him before the season started to retire, but that never happened. But he made one trip. They said, or in the paper, the Post said he made one trip, long trip this year, and he came out. And he said he was too tired to go to the stadium the next day to do a game. And he said that was what made up my mind. I have to call it quits.
He said in the interview or the 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 press conference they gave, he should have done it in March during spring training. He thought about it. He said, "Well, let me see what I can do." But he realized a week into the season or 2 weeks, whatever it was, he couldn't do it.
Exactly right. Yeah. You're exactly right.
Well, maybe we can invite him on, Don, sometime. See if he comes on with us.
Absolutely.
I know we're working to get Jim Cott on. He was going to be with us today, but he's traveling, so hopefully the next week or two we'll get the great Jim Cott on, who was also a Yankee broadcaster for a long time.
Yes, he was. I'll tell you, a great guy, and I look forward to getting him on with us and talking about it. Finally into the Hall of Fame, one of the most controversial long-term decisions before putting him in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
But he finally got there, and unlike a lot of players and managers and coaches and owners, he's 80, I think he's 84.
85,
I'm almost sure he's 80.
Like that, right?
Yeah, something 84, 85. So he got in before he passed away, which is terrific. And like Richie Allen is never going to get in before he died because he passed away last year. So it's one of those things that it's very, very nice to see that Jim Cott got in, and he's got some great stories to tell. And hopefully we're going to have him on with us in the next couple of weeks.
That'll be good. But that'll wrap it up for today. And Don, always good to chat, even though we're sad Roman's no longer with us, but he had a pretty good long life and a good career. And, of course, John Sterling is still with us, so we wish him a long retirement like Vin Scully had. I mean, Scully retired at 89, and he lived another 5-6 years. So we hope the same for John Sterling.
Absolutely, especially with young triplets, or not young triplets, but family. And I know he's probably pretty close to all those kids. And so the very, very best of luck to John Sterling.
That'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.